So, last week we had covered about Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu. We talked about his whole shahada, his martyrdom, what took place with that, and how that fulfilled the prophecy of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Moving ahead from there, we mentioned that the assassination and the shahada of Uthman radiallahu anhu, that was the sheathed sword of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once that sword was to be unleashed and bloodshed would be spread, that sword would come out forever and it would never be put back inside of its sheath. And that's exactly what we saw from the time which Uthman radiallahu anhu was martyred. We saw that the Muslim Ummah faced a very, very great crisis. There was lots of fitna that was spread. There were many battles that took place. There was a lot of infighting which happened. And it led to a lot of corruption and chaos within the Ummah afterwards. And eventually what this led to was the emergence of what we call the Khawarij. This was a sect which they came out from a place called Harura, which was near Iraq. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he mentioned the detailed description of these people, how they're going to be, what are some of their sifat, what are some of their qualities. And in the time of Ali radiallahu anhu, these people, they came out. So basically, to understand the Khawarij, first we're going to go into the ahadith of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, what he mentioned about them. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he's mentioned in the hadith of Sahih Muslim. Abu Sa'id Khudri radiallahu anhu is the narrator. He says that these people will come out, قَوْمٌ تَحْقِرُونَ صَلَاتَكُمْ مَعَ صَلَاتِهِمْ فَيَقْرَؤُونَ الْقُرْآنَ لَا يُجَاوِزُ حُلُوقَهُمْ يَمْرُقُونَ مِنَ الدِّينِ مُرُوقَ السَّهْمِ مِنَ الرَّمِيَّةِ. The Prophet ﷺ says that these people that will come out, normally when you think of a sect, someone that's coming out who's intending evil, you'll think, man, they're probably very horrible people, very evil, they don't pray, they curse, they don't do anything good, they don't do any ibadah, they don't do any acts of worship. But the Khawarij, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, the Khawarij are such people that if you were to see them pray, how they perform salah, you would consider your salah to be insignificant in comparison with their salah. Meaning outwardly, they're very, very pious. They engage in a lot of ibadah. If you look at their fasting and your fasting, you'll think that your fasting is nothing compared to how much these people fast. Right? If you look at their ibadah compared to yours, you'll think yourself completely insignificant. Man, these are the real pious people. So outwardly, this is how they will be. يَتْلُونَ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ رَتْبًا لَا يُجَاوِزُ حَنَاجِرَهُمْ. They'll recite the Qur'an, but it will not go past their throats. Meaning, the Qur'an Kareem, they'll be reading it just as a lip service. They'll do lots of ibadah, they'll do many things outwardly, but inside of their hearts, it will not have reached there. And these people emerged from Harura, a place near Iraq, and the historians mention that these people, they actually came from the same group of rebels that went against Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu. So these were from the same people. And they first pledged allegiance to Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu. So they were all for him, they were with him, they pledged allegiance to him, they were there to serve him and be part of his people. But eventually what happened is when the differences began to rise, ikhtilaf and differences of opinion started to take place. So Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, he decided that there should be shura. There should be mutual consultation, and based on the opinion of the senior Sahaba, a decision will be made. And the Khawarij, at this time, they were supporters of Ali radiallahu anhu, but when he made this decision of consultation, they went against him. and they used the verse of the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Inil hukmu illa lillah," that rulings are only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Judgment is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they, as they say, kalimatu haqqin uridu bihal batil, urida bihal batil, that it was a statement of truth. It's an ayat of the Quran, but they took it completely out of context. So they said, decisions can only be with Allah. What does this mean? There's no such thing as consultation. And the Khawarij, they were a people that were very, very extreme in their mentality. Very, very extreme. And it's mentioned that the punishments that they used to give people, very, very extreme in nature. It's mentioned about them, Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, mentions about them, that they would even force women who were in menstruation, they would force them to pray also. Meaning that very, very extreme in nature. They were for Ali radiallahu anhu, they were with him. The moment they had a disagreement, bam, they turned their backs on Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu. So again, they had this separation, thinking themselves to be very, very pious, very, very high, very, very intelligent. They took these verses of the Quran completely out of context, and this is what led them to cause a lot of bloodshed and go against Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu. If you can just close that garage, it's getting kind of cold. You're going to have to hold it. You're going to have to hold it. Bas. Press it once. Bas, that's good. So Rasulullah ﷺ mentioned these things about these people, that يَمْرُقُونَ مِنَ الدِّينِ كَمَا يَمْرُقُ السَّهْمُ مِنَ الرَّمِيَّةِ, that they will leave Islam, they will separate from the deen just as quickly as in the arrow of a hunter, how it separates from the prey, from the hunted animal. Right? So quickly, when a person shoots an animal, right? The arrow goes inside, you pull it out right away. So see how swiftly it comes out. Just like this, these people on the outward, it seems like they're very, very pious. It seems like they're very, very muttaqi people. But يَمْرُقُونَ مِنَ الدِّينِ, they will leave Islam very, very quickly, just like how the arrow will come out from the hunted animal. And the Messenger alayhi salam, in a very interesting narration, he mentions that وَآيَةُ ذَلِكَ أَنَّ فِيهِمْ رَجُلٌ, that the sign of these people is that you will see from amongst them, there will be a man from amongst them. And the Prophet ﷺ gave a description of, you could say, like a deformity that this guy will have. He'll have very, very short arms. And somewhere near his armpit, he will have some type of deformity. And some of the riwayat mention it's like an extra piece of flesh, which looks like, the limb of a woman, like a woman's breast, an extra piece of flesh near that person's armpit. And Rasulullah ﷺ even further said that on that lump of flesh near his armpit, there will be some white hairs which will be protruding out from there. So imagine, this is what the Prophet ﷺ is saying even before these people came about. They didn't even appear yet. Nobody knew who these people were, but the Prophet ﷺ is saying, these people will soon appear. And this is their description. They will read Quran like this. They'll be very pious like this on the outside. And the sign is that one of their men, he'll have this deformity. So eventually, when these people, they stood up against Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, and they started to battle against him, there was a specific battle that took place, which was known as the Battle of Nahrawan. This is when Ali radiallahu anhu, very decisively, he defeated the Khawarij. He fought against them, he battled against them, and they were defeated, majority of them. Once they were defeated, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, he told the people, go look amongst those who have been killed and look for a man that has this description. They went once, they came back, they said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, we looked amongst those who have been killed, we didn't find anyone that matched this description. So Ali radiallahu anhu, he told them again, second time, he said, no, you guys didn't look properly. Go again and look for this person, this is his description, near his armpit, he has this deformity, make sure you check again properly. Second time they went back and they looked and they did not find anything again. Third time, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu sent them, and the third time he actually went himself also. As he went, there was a group of these Khawarij people laying on the floor, and they were on top of each other. So Ali radiallahu anhu, he moved some of these bodies around, and finally the one that was way on the floor, underneath this pile of people, Ali radiallahu anhu checked him, and exactly according to the description which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, that person was found exactly according to the description that the Prophet alaihi salam mentioned. So you can see that again, exactly as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prophesied, as he had mentioned, this man was found with the same exact description which the Prophet alaihi salam mentioned to them. These were the Khawarij that came out, and the Khawarij, they were specifically in that time, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, but you will see that even later on, even in today's time, even in the future perhaps, you will see groups who claim to be Muslim, groups who claim to stick to the Quran, groups who claim to stick to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Outwardly, they may look very, very pious, but inwardly, their teachings go completely against the Quran and the beautiful Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Right? So don't be deceived. These things the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned before, you will see these things happening. It's not something to be surprised about. And subhanallah, this is what you see. They have the Amirul Mu'mineen in their midst, Ali radiallahu anhu. A man that the Prophet ﷺ praised his knowledge. أَنَا مَدِينَةُ الْعِلْمِ وَعَلِيٌّ بَابُهَا. I'm the city of knowledge, I'm the ocean of knowledge. Ali radiallahu anhu is the door of this knowledge. They looked at the Quran themselves, and they said, well, look at this verse. Ali radiallahu anhu, he's going against this verse. They raised their swords against him. Right? So this shows us, very, very important. Always stick to our leaders, stick to our ulama, stick to the people who have knowledge. Right? This is exactly what they failed to do. They looked at the Quran and they looked at it independently. We know better. They looked at the hadith, we know better. They looked at the Quran, we know better than Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu would know. They raised their swords against him, and they became from amongst the despised of the ummah. They became from amongst the despised of the history of Islam. People that the Prophet ﷺ prophesied exactly how they will be destroyed. Right? So we learn from this something. Whatever you learn about deen, whatever you learn about Islam, learn it within its appropriate context. Learn it the way the ulama amongst the generations have understood those narrations, how they have understood the Quran. That is how we will understand Islam. That is how we will understand deen. The moment that we take it for ourselves and think that we know better, that is when we will be setting ourselves up for failure. So this was the Khawarij. This is what took place in the time of Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu. And eventually these same people, they became very prominent in Iraq. And just like Umar radiyallahu anhu, when he was going for Salatul Fajr and he was assassinated, these same Khawarij, a man from amongst them, he attacked Ali radiyallahu anhu while he was performing the Salatul Fajr. And that is how Ali radiyallahu anhu became shaheed. He lost his life and he became martyred because of these Khawarij and because of these people. So this was their pretext. إِنِ الْحُكْمُ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ. That judgment and making decisions, this is only in the hands of Allah. So if Ali radiallahu anhu is going to consult regarding the matters, this is against the Quran, and anybody who goes against the Quran, they become kafir. They become a disbeliever. Na'udhu billah. So see how quickly anyone that goes against your belief, that person has suddenly become a kafir, and now you're allowed to take their blood. That's how extreme these people took the interpretations from their own side. Eventually, when Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu became martyred, you had the Khilafah of Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, which took place. And following this, there were a lot of eruptions that took place, many little skirmishes that happened amongst Sahaba radiallahu anhum. And as we mentioned before, that whatever happened amongst Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they are people which Allah has said radiyallahu anhum wa radu an. Allah is pleased with them, they are pleased with Allah. Whatever mistakes, whatever things happened, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forgiven them inshaAllah. And they are very people of a very lofty status. It is not our place to discuss and go into details of these things and criticize the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. Right? And there was a great muhaddith by the name of Abu Zur'a Razi radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Abu Zur'a Razi, somebody came to him and asked him, Ibn Asakir rahimahullah mentions this narration, he says, a person came to Abu Zur'a Razi and he said, I dislike Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu. Right? And even today, na'udhu billah, you hear people saying so many inappropriate things. We have to remember to stay within the fold which our Prophet ﷺ taught us. These are special people, they're respectable people, they were blessed with the companionship of the Prophet ﷺ. Our tongues should not say anything but good. So he came to him and he said, I dislike Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu. So Abu Zur'a said, why is this? He said, because there was a friction between him and Ali radiyallahu anhu. Right? And remember, as we mentioned before, there could be friction between two good people. Right? It doesn't mean one of them has to be bad. Just because two people disagree on a matter. Abu Bakr and Umar radiyallahu anhum, they also had disagreements. They also had ikhtilaf on certain issues. Are we going to now say, na'udhu billah, Abu Bakr was a good person and Umar was bad? Or na'udhu billah, Umar was bad and vice versa? We're not going to say that. You could have two good people who have differences of opinion. So look at the beautiful answer that Abu Zur'a Razi, rahimahullah, what he said. He said, Rabbu Muawiyata Rabbun Rahim wa khasmuhu khasmun kareem. He said, the Lord of Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu, He is a very merciful Lord. Rabbun Rahim. Wa khasmuhu khasmun kareem. And the opposition of Muawiyah, right? They were battling, they had some differences. Who was the one that they had differences with? Sayyidina Ali radiyallahu anhu. So the opposition of Muawiyah was a very noble and forgiving opposition as well. So the Lord of Muawiyah is noble and forgiving. The opposition of Muawiyah, Sayyidina Ali, was very noble and forgiving. So why are you coming in between them to say that you have dislike for any of them? Right? Allah has forgiven them, the opposition has forgiven them, what are you coming in between for? Right? And these are very important things, because people, they really take these things out of context and take it to a level that it does not need to go towards. It's mentioned also in some of the riwayat that when all of these frictions were taking place, there would be people from both camps that would pray behind the same imam. Imagine. There was no friction of the hearts. They were both, whatever happened amongst each other, they were doing it because of ijtihad. They were doing it because of a difference of opinion. They were doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not our place to speak and talk bad. So this led up to the time when Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu, he was granted the khilafah, and when this took place, there was a slight difference of opinion which took place between Muawiyah radiallahu anhu and Hassan radiallahu anhu. Right? So what had happened was, Hassan and Hussein radiallahu anhuma, we all know they're the grandchildren of the Prophet alayhi salam, and they are people that had lots of influence. Many people loved them. They resembled the Prophet alayhi salam. They mentioned that from upper body one of them resembled, and from the lower body the second one resembled. Right? So you could imagine these young children, eventually they became, young men. They grew up in the lap of the Prophet ﷺ. Senior Sahaba would see them playing with the Prophet ﷺ. They had a lot of love and respect for them, because they came from a very noble family. They were very, very close to the Prophet ﷺ, and he had a lot of love for them. So a lot of people supported Hassan and Hussein radiallahu anhum, and eventually so many people, they stood up behind Hassan radiallahu anhu and they said, this is our Amir. Right? This is our Amir, this is our Khalifa, we're accepting him as our leader. And then you had Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, who was, in Syria or wherever he was, in Sham. And he also had his group of supporters. Now there was a bit of friction. Some people are saying Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, and some people they're saying Hassan radiallahu anhu. And again, these differences started to come about amongst the Muslim Ummah. So at this moment, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ comes to light here, where he said, and this hadith is narrated by Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, Abu Musa Ash'ari radiyallahu anhu narrates that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned regarding him, Inna ibni hadha sayyidun. This son of mine, son, but it's referring to his grandson, right? This son of mine is a Sayyid. And what is the meaning of Sayyid? He's a leader. He is a naturally born leader. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him these qualities. He's given him these sifat. So this son of mine is a leader, and he goes on to say, لَعَلَّ اللَّهَ أَن يُصْلِحَ بِهِ بَيْنَ فِئَتَيْنِ عَظِيمَتَيْنِ مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. Perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will use him to make sulah, to bring unity amongst two enormous groups of Muslims. He will be the one to unite their hands. So you got two separate groups amongst the Muslims. فِئَتَيْنِ عَظِيمَتَيْنِ. Huge groups, not any small groups. Two huge camps from the Muslim Ummah. This son of mine, Hassan, he will show his leadership, and he will bring both of these camps together. He will unite them. This is what the Prophet ﷺ said. And remember, in his lifetime, Hassan and Hussein were who? There's two small kids running around playing. He would hug them, he would smell them. So the Prophet ﷺ is giving this prophecy that when they get older, they're going to be leaders, and they will facilitate this unity for the Ummah. And Hassan radiallahu anhu, he goes eventually and he meets with Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. And with all of the support that he had, with all of the followers and things that he could have done, he said, I will not allow any blood to be spilt in the Ummah for the sake of my leadership. Right? Just like how we learned Uthman radiallahu anhu, how he was. Hassan radiallahu anhu, he took the same approach and he said, none of this is going to happen under my watch. I will not allow for the sake of my leadership that anyone should be harmed, anyone's blood should be spilt. So he told all of his followers, all of the people that were behind him, he showed them all that he is giving his hand, he is giving his allegiance to Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, and he took the bay'ah, he took the pledge of allegiance at the hand of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, and he showed everyone that this is the Khalifa, this is the Amirul Mu'mineen, I'm not going to jump up for power. I would rather not have power. I would rather sit in my seat and not have that authority. Give it up to Muawiyah radiallahu. But we should not have differences in the Ummah. We should not have differences and people fighting. And now remember, from the time of Uthman radiyallahu anhu, what happened? You had rebels that surrounded his house. You had people that were depriving him of food and water. And he was assassinated, bloodshed. And just before that, you had Umar radiyallahu anhu, bloodshed. He was assassinated. After Uthman, you had differences. One group is saying that we should avenge Uthman radiyallahu anhu. One group is saying no. Again, differences. Fighting, infighting, skirmishes. Finally, when Hassan radiyallahu anhu showed his leadership qualities, that was finally the moment where the Muslim Ummah found some peace. The Ummah found some peace, they found some calm, and they found some rest. And at that moment in history, they call it Sanatul Jama'ah. Sanatul Jama'ah. Jama'ah, it means congregation, it means when everybody is together, it means when there is unity. That is finally the time where there was unity. Now my brothers and sisters, if you want to learn something from this example of Hassan radiyallahu anhu, there will be times where you have opposition. There will be times where people will say things to you. There will be times where people will get on your nerves. And sometimes the wisest thing to do is what? Let it go for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let it go for the sake of Allah, because there will be much more khair and benefit and peace and calm for yourself, for that person, for the people around you. Peace and calm and khair isn't just avoiding dispute, avoiding arguments. I don't have time for all of this. Right? And we learn from the very beautiful statements of our ulama, Man kana nadruhu ila majal al-qada'i. Allama Tanwi rahimahullah mentioned this. He says that whoever's gaze is set upon the place where decrees are made, where the decrees are issued. Whoever's gaze is set on the place where decrees are issued. What does that mean? Their eyes are constantly towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their mindset is that nothing happens in this world except that it is from the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whoever's gaze is set upon there, فَلَا يُفْنِي أَيَّامَهُ فِي مُخَاصَمَةِ النَّاسِ. That person is not going to spend their days disputing with people, arguing with people. No, they won't waste their time in that. They're going to know whatever is happening because of up there. The decrees are being issued from up there. Right? Like sometimes we hear the story of our elders where a person came, I forgot which one of our seniors it was, but a young student came to them with a cup of water. And as he was bringing this water, he tripped and he fell down. And the water just spilled everywhere on top of him. So he was expecting that the person is going to get angry, he's going to shout him, he's going to start shouting at him and, getting angry. Like, what's wrong with you? Why are you so clumsy? You're not even being careful that you don't spill the water. So that person simply told him, he said, son, have you performed Salatul Fajr today? He said, no, I did not perform Salatul Fajr. He said, okay. Well, you didn't perform Salatul Fajr. That is why the barakah and the blessings is lost for you today. That's why the water has been spilt. Go make wudu and perform 2 rakats of your qada. You see, that whole dispute, that argument, that anger, that rage, all of that was avoided. Why? Because his gaze and his mindset was where? It was on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We also hear some of our elders and our pious predecessors that sometimes they would enter the class, they would enter their hadith dars, and sometimes the students, they would not be behaving as they should be behaving. They didn't start, screaming at everyone, hitting everyone. No. They dismissed the class and they said, you know what? Something must be wrong with my a'mal. Something must be wrong with my connection and my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They made tawbah, they read 2 rakats, they engaged in some ibadah, and then the next day, everything would be back to normal. Right? And of course, that was the case with their times when students were on another level. My students that are here, don't expect me to behave the same with you, huh? So this is what we learn, that avoid disputes, avoid arguments, and keep your gaze on where the issues are coming from. It comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you are right with Allah, then inshaAllah, there will be barakah in your life amongst people, there will be goodness in your affairs, and man tawada'a lillah, rafa'ahu Allah. The person who has humility for the sake of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will elevate that person. So look, zahiran, apparently, Hassan radiallahu anhu gave up the khilafah. And what is khilafah? Khilafah is power, right? It's power, it's position, it's honor, it's being the leader of the whole Muslim ummah. He gave that up. So now apparently it looks like what? He's losing that honor. He's losing out. Right? But in fact, what did it actually do? Instead of bringing him down, this act of maturity, this great act of leadership, this act of bringing unity within the ummah, it actually elevated him. And it made him amongst one of the greatest leaders that the ummah has ever seen, because of his maturity and his outstanding level of understanding and maturity. That, okay, I'm going to be the Khalifa, people will follow me, but what are the other consequences? There's going to be bloodshed, people will die. Right? So sometimes you also have to learn, choose your battles wisely. You don't always have to reply back. Right? Sometimes you might know that you're in the right. You know that the other person is wrong. But it takes a mature person to say, you know what? I don't have time for this. In that time that I could argue with this guy and prove my point, right? I could recite salawat ala nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam 100 times. I'd rather read my durood than waste my time with this person. Right? Within that time, I could read one time Surah Yasin. Why should I waste my time arguing with this person? So remember, man tawada'a lillah rafa'ahu Allah. The more humility you have for the sake of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will only elevate you. And that's what we see from our pious predecessors, Sayyidina Uthman, Sayyidina Ali, Sayyidina Hassan radiyallahu anhum ajma'een. This was the prophecy of the Prophet alayhi salam with regards to Hassan radiyallahu anhu. Moving on, we're covering those signs which the Prophet alayhi salam has prophesied, and they have already happened, already taken place. It's not something that we're waiting for. These things have already happened. Right? So you can imagine signs of the last day, which the Prophet ﷺ has told us about, and a number of them, not just one or two, but a large number of them, they've already happened. So you can imagine, in the time of Sahaba, they used to be afraid of Qiyamah. When the winds would blow, when things would happen, they would get scared. Oh my God, maybe it's Qiyamah. They would quickly go and start performing salah. So imagine now, 1400 years later, and a lot of those signs have already happened, and every day they're continuously happening. How much should we not be focused and turning towards the akhirah and turning towards the next life? The next sign that we see is from the hadith of Bukhari. Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu reports that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لا تقوم الساعة حتى تخرج نار من أرض الحجاز. Qiyamah will not take place until a fire erupts from Hijaz. Hijaz is referring to the Arabian Peninsula, Makkah and Medina, that area. A big fire is going to erupt from the Hijaz. That's one of the signs that will take place. And the Prophet ﷺ, he gave the description of this fire. What is this fire going to look like? Or what is it going to do? تُضِيءُ أَعْنَاقَ الْإِبِلِ بِبُصْرَى. That this fire will erupt and is going to be so huge that the necks of the camels in Busra will be lightened up. The light from this fire will shine so bright that all the way in Busra, Busra is in Syria, in Sham. Imagine how far. I don't know exactly how many miles it is, but from Medina all the way to Busra, Syria. Right? One is Basra. Basra is in Iraq. But the hadith is not talking about Basra, it's talking about Busra, which is in Syria. So all the way in Syria, the lights from this fire will be so enormous, so powerful, that they will be able to see the necks of their camels in the dark night. Right? Usually, especially in that time, there was not a lot of lights everywhere. People would rely on lanterns and things like that. But the fire would be so big that they would be able to clearly see their camels. Very, very clearly. They could see their necks, see their shape, see the description of their camels because of the brightness of this fire. Right? So, this hadith is referring to a fire which is going to take place in Hijaz. And as I mentioned, all of these signs have already taken place. So in the year 654 Hijri. Right now we're in which year? 1440? 1443 or 1442? Some saying 43, some saying 42. And some saying 444. Subhanallah wa bihamdi. I'll leave you guys to check your love for the Islamic calendar. So, 654 Hijri. About how many generations ago? We're in 1440 at least, right? So, that means from 10 to 4, that's about 4 to 5 generations. Right? And then from 6 to 10, that's another 4. So you can say about 8, 9 generations or so. 654. So in that time, 654, those of you guys who are studying Riyadh al-Salihin and those other books, Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, this was around his time and he talks about this in his books. He talks about this fire that took place, the sifat of the fire, what it looked like, what happened exactly. In 654. And the interesting thing is the narrations that came out of Busra. Busra is the place in Sham. When they described this fire, do you know what they would say? They said this fire was so big that from Syria, in Busra, رَأَوْا صَفَحَاتِ أَعْنَاقِ إِبِلِهِمْ فِي ضَوْءِ تِلْكَ النَّارِ. The words they used to describe this fire. Not, it was as tall as our rooftops. It was as tall as our sheep. It was burning hot like this. Or like, of all the descriptions that they could have used, they said the fire was so bright that in Busra, we could see the necks of our camels lighting up in this fire. And look, the exact description which the Prophet ﷺ said to describe the fire. The people in Busra, they were saying the same exact words. And this fire lasted for 3 months long. And everywhere was complete darkness. Everywhere was complete darkness after a while because of the smoke. Complete darkness everywhere. Right? We thought those 2-3 days were bad for us. This was 3 months long, smoke and darkness everywhere. And the people thought that it was Qiyamah. And it's mentioned that around this time in 654, in Medina Munawwara, there were people that had started doing certain things which were unacceptable in Islam. And when this fire broke out, they said all of Medina Munawwara, this fire broke out in Hijaz, in Medina, in 654. They said the masajid were packed. Everybody was performing nafil. Everybody was fasting during the day. Everybody was giving charity. Whatever evil that was taking place, all of those things were gone. All of those things were finished off. Right? So, you can say this, outwardly it looks like a punishment. Outwardly it looks like something that's very, very bad. But look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rahmah, His love and His mercy, especially for the people of Medina, maybe this was something that brought them back towards Islam and brought them back towards the truth. And before this, around the time of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, going back to that time, this is history, so we have a time machine. We can go into the future and also we can go back sometimes. Two more inshallah and we're going to end. The first one is a hadith by Khabbab ibn al-Arat radiyallahu anhu. He narrates and is quoted by Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. There were times where Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, they were in Makkah, they were being tortured. Bilal radiyallahu anhu is being burnt in the sand. Boulders are being put on his chest. People are getting beat up. Abu Bakr Siddeeq, he's beaten unconscious until his nose is completely flattened. They went through all of these hard times. So some of them came to Rasulullah ﷺ and they said, Ya Rasulullah, when is the help going to come? When is Allah's help going to come upon us? This life, we're going through so much tribulation. When is things going to get easier for us? So then Rasulullah ﷺ mentioned to them about the previous nations. What used to happen to them. Some of them, a saw would be placed right on their top of their head. And they would be sawed in half. But they would not disbelieve in their religion. They would not disbelieve in Allah. They would hold firm to their faith. They would hold firm to their iman. Until they're completely split into two. So the Prophet ﷺ said, you guys should have patience, have sabr. This is what the previous people used to go through. You should also have some of the same type of himmah, the same type of courage, right? Bear with patience, bear through this time. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, don't worry, a time will come that a person will be able to travel all the way from Sana'a to Hadramaut. And they will not have fear of anything. لا يخاف إلا Allah. So he will not fear anything except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أو الذئب على غنمه. Or he might fear a wolf attacking his sheep. That's it. There's not going to be any robbers. There's not going to be any of these tribulations. People coming to hurt you. There's going to be absolute peace. Right? Now just think about it. At that time, they're getting burnt. They're getting lashed. They're getting beaten. And the Prophet ﷺ is telling them, don't worry. This is the time of sacrifice. There will be a time coming in the future where things will be very, very, very easy. And complete peace. So the Prophet ﷺ also indicated towards this. And in another narration, he mentioned a person will travel from min Iraq, min bayn al-Iraq wa Makkah, la yakhafu illa dalal al-tariq. This is the riwayat of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. He says a person will travel all the way from Iraq to Makkah. And there's only one thing that he will fear. Not robberies, not oppression. The only thing that he will fear is perhaps he might lose the way. He'll take a wrong turn somewhere. Besides that, everything is going to be very, very, very peaceful. Right? And last one, inshallah, that we're going to cover is the hadith of Haram bint Milhan radiyallahu ta'ala anha. And this is also from Bukhari. Haram bint Milhan radiyallahu anha. You guys are probably wondering, why is her name Haram? Haram is like something bad, right? Haram is not always bad. Because, like for example, you say Al-Masjidul Haram. The masjid in Makkah where the Kaaba is, we call that Al-Masjidul Haram. Because it's sanctified. So something that is sanctified, it has sanctity, you can also call that as something which is haram. Right? So, Haram bint Milhan radiyallahu ta'ala anha. She was a very, very special companion of the Prophet ﷺ, and she also had some family ties with the Prophet ﷺ. She also had family ties with the Prophet ﷺ, and this woman, she was the maternal aunt of Anas bin Malik radiyallahu anhu. We all know Anas bin Malik, right? Radiyallahu anhu, very, very famous Sahabi. From a very, very young age, he was set as the, khadim of the Prophet ﷺ. He would serve the Prophet ﷺ from a very, very young age. Very famous Sahabi. This is his paternal aunt. Maternal aunt, sorry, from his mom's side. Because his mom was Sulaym radiyallahu anha. And Sulaym's sister was Haram. These were relatives of the Prophet ﷺ, and very, very blessed family. From all of them, you will see that many of them, the Prophet ﷺ praised them, he would visit them, he would send gifts for them, they would send gifts for him. And Sulaym radiyallahu anha, the Prophet ﷺ had dreams of her in Jannah. There were footsteps in Jannah, and the Prophet ﷺ was looking around to see who's here in Jannah already, who's enjoying. And when the Prophet ﷺ looked, it was Sulaym radiyallahu anha. And she is also known as Rumaysa radiyallahu anha. So this was her sister, Haram bint Milhan. The Prophet ﷺ, he used to visit them a lot. He would sit with them, he would talk to them, and he prayed in their house, they would serve him. So one time the Prophet ﷺ visited Haram, and he's taking a nap, right? And these are family of the Prophet ﷺ. That's why he was very informal with them. With family you can just come and lay on the couch and take a nap. So the Prophet ﷺ, he's sleeping. ثُمَّ اسْتَيْقَظَ يَتَبَسَّمُ. The Prophet ﷺ, he wakes up smiling. The Prophet ﷺ, he wakes up and he's smiling, right, from his sleep, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. فَقُلْتُ مَا أَضْحَكَكَ. She says, what has made you laugh? Why are you laughing? So nobody wakes up laughing. Like, okay, if you heard a joke or something, then you're laughing. But who just wakes up and right away you're smiling and laughing right away? So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, أُنَاسٌ مِّنْ أُمَّتِي عُرِضُوا عَلَيَّ. There is a group from my ummah that has been presented to me. A group from my ummah has just been presented to me. While he was asleep. And as we know, the dreams of prophets, the dreams of anbiya, they are wahi, they're inspiration. It's not like our dreams, where our dreams, adghathu ahlam. You just dream sometimes whatever you're thinking of during the day, random dreams. Shaitan also brings dreams. But for prophets, their every vision is wahi, it's inspiration from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, Prophet ﷺ wakes up and he says, these people from my ummah have been presented to me. And what was it about these people that made me smile? يَرْكَبُونَ هَذَا الْبَحْرَ الْأَخْضَرِ كَالْمُلُوكِ عَلَى الْأَسِرَّةِ. These people, they will be traveling in the ocean. They'll be traveling on the seas. Spreading the message of Allah, spreading the message of deen, spreading the message of Islam, and going out for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. كَالْمُلُوكِ عَلَى الْأَسِرَّةِ. Like kings, how they sit on their thrones. Right? So, right now, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they're in Medina Munawwara, things are not always going that good. But the Prophet ﷺ he sees this, that not only is my ummah gonna travel on the land for the sake of spreading Islam, but one day they're also gonna be traveling the seas, like kings sitting on thrones. And when the Prophet ﷺ saw this, he became very, very happy, and he woke up smiling. Now, brothers and sisters, look at the Sahabi radiyallahu anha, Haram bint Milhan radiyallahu anha. You would imagine, okay, she's a woman, she's a female. So if she sees that and she hears that from the Prophet ﷺ, then she might say, well, mashallah, Prophet ﷺ, what a great dream. May Allah make it mubarak for you and mubarak for these people who will be part of your ummah. You know what she said? She said, Ya Rasulullah, make dua that I'm from those people. This is a woman. This is a sahabiya. What is she saying? Make dua that I'm from those people. What are those people going to have? Difficulties, hardship, you're traveling. You're going for the cause of Allah. You could die. You end up in battles, you end up in war. You could get stabbed, you could get killed. You end up tired, shortages of food. Sometimes you get dehydrated. Sometimes the sun is on top of your head. But look at these people. They loved sacrifice for Islam so much that she says, Ya Rasul, make dua that I'm from those people. I want to be from them. Don't let that opportunity pass me by. I wish that I could take that spot. Right? So, one thing that we have to learn from these people, and their beautiful examples, is that they loved to sacrifice and struggle for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those who strive in our path, they struggle in our path, then we will guide them. لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. We will guide them towards our pathways. We will open up the doors of hidayah and guidance for them. When they're willing to sacrifice for Allah's sake. Right? So, this is something that a lot of people, when it comes to jobs, we will sacrifice. When it comes to school, we will sacrifice. Stay up till 2, 3 a.m. I got finals. Getting this job, I got to make sure I try my hardest. Now when it comes to Islam and when it comes to deen, Inna Allah ghafurur rahim. Allah is the most merciful. So I can do whatever I want. But when it comes to the other things, your teacher is not the most merciful. You better get on top of it, right? Your job and all of that, the world is not merciful to you. But when it comes to Islam, then this is the mentality that we have. We should, of course, Allah is Ghafurur Rahim. Allah is the most merciful and the most forgiving. But we must understand that a true Muslim accepts sacrifice for his sake. That's what makes you love Allah. That's what makes you love Islam. That's what makes you love your deen, is when you have gone through something for it. Right? If you look at all the previous Muslims, Abu Bakr was attacked, Bilal was attacked, Ali was attacked. They were all attacked. They bled because of Islam. They were hurt because of Islam. They suffered loss of wealth, loss of family members. They were boycotted because of Islam. What did Islam mean to them after that? It meant a lot. They invested a lot into it. It was very, very powerful bond and relationship because they put in the sacrifice and the work for it. But if a person did not put in the sacrifice and they did not put in the work for it, you will not have a lot of value for your iman. So this is what these people were all about. They were about that sacrifice for the sake of Islam. So then what happens after this? The Prophet ﷺ da'a laha. He made dua for her that you're from amongst these people. Okay? And then the Prophet ﷺ ثُمَّ نَامَ الثَّانِيَةَ. The Prophet ﷺ, he took a nap again. Prophet ﷺ, he took a nap again. And this time, the Prophet ﷺ, he woke up and again he's smiling. Again, the Prophet ﷺ is smiling. So, again, Rasulullah ﷺ told her a similar thing. That, there was another group and they were traveling on the oceans for the sake of Islam. And they're like kings on their thrones. And then what did she say? Again, she said, O Prophet of Allah, make dua that I could be from amongst them. And then what did the Prophet ﷺ say? Anyone know? He said, Anti min al-awwaleen. You're from the first ones. Remember that first dream that I saw? You're part of that group already. You can't be part of both groups. Your spot is already secure. So the Prophet ﷺ saw this and he made this dua for Haram radiyallahu anha. In the era of Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu, they went towards Constantinople. Constantinople. This is a big name, a very important city. We're going to hear a lot more about this, inshallah, later on. But Constantinople, this is modern day. MashaAllah, there we go. Istanbul. Modern day Turkey, Istanbul. This is Constantinople. So Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, he led a battalion to go towards Constantinople. And they traveled on the sea. And they were كَالْمُلُوكِ عَلَى الْأَسِرَّةِ. They were like these kings. And this was the prophecy of the Prophet ﷺ. And Haram radiallahu anha, as she was on this journey, she faced an injury because of one of the animals. Something happened. She got in an accident and fell off. And she became a martyr right outside of Constantinople. And her grave is there in Cyprus. Turkey, Greece, Cyprus, this whole area. Right there near the water. In Cyprus, she is buried. Radiyallahu ta'ala anha. The Prophet ﷺ, he also prophesied the conquering of Constantinople. Inshallah, we'll get there. This happened with the Ottomans. And then later on towards Qiyamah, towards the major signs, Constantinople will be conquered again. So a lot of ulama and historians, they say this is an indication that Istanbul won't be with the Muslims forever. It'll be reconquered. And then eventually towards the ends of times, again, there will be a battle for Constantinople. And before we end off, I want to mention one last thing about Haram radiyallahu anha and her sister Sulaym. It's mentioned in the riwayat, in the narrations, that when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam would come over, and sometimes he would sleep there and he would nap, the Prophet alayhi salam, he would sweat. And you know what they would do? They would take little bottles and they would fill it with the sweat of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And one time the Prophet woke up and he said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I take this, we use it as itr, and we put it on our children for protection and barakah." And the Prophet ﷺ condoned, and he said, "This is a good thing what you do." So even the sweat of the Prophet ﷺ, it was itr, it was perfume, it smelled good, right? And from this we can see how much love these people had for the Prophet ﷺ. This is something that intellect cannot teach you. Your mind, it cannot teach you. This is something of the heart. The love which they had for the Prophet ﷺ, right? And you'll see that last week we also spoke about the Sulh of Hudaybiyah and how the Muslims, they wanted to go for Umrah, and then Uthman radiallahu anhu, he went to the people of Makkah. The whole story we covered last week. During that time, when the spies from the Quraysh came to the Muslims, one of the things that they noticed and took particular interest in was seeing how much the Muslims respected the Prophet ﷺ. Those spies, when they went back, they were confused. They were like telling the chiefs of the Quraysh, "We saw something like we've never seen before. We have never seen a leader that is revered more by his people than this man Muhammad. This has gotten very serious. You guys better watch out. These people will lay their lives down. This is not a joke anymore." They said, "What are you talking about?" They said, "Yes, when he does ablution and he makes wudu, the water is not allowed to drop on the floor. They collect that water in buckets and they use it after. If the Prophet ﷺ ever, spits, they will not allow that spit to touch the floor. They will collect it in their hands and put it on their bodies." Again, this is something, if you think with your intellect, "Ew, that's gross, oh my God, this and that." That's when you're using your brain. When you use your heart, the love that these people had, this was something completely different. This was something on a completely different level. So I'm mentioning this because of the current atmosphere that we're facing, right? The solution to the issues that are going on right now with what's happening in France. And wallahi, as a Muslim, if you love the Prophet ﷺ, you should feel more bad about this than if cartoons were made of yourself. If cartoons were made of your own mother, your own father, your own children, your own self, you wouldn't care as much than disrespect taking place towards the Prophet ﷺ. Right? So, what should we do? Number one, as much as you can, during these times, recite salawat ala nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam in abundance, even more than you would in normal times. Read Durood Sharif as much as you can, because when people wish to disrespect, they wish to extinguish the light of the Prophet ﷺ, we will continuously allow the light of the Prophet ﷺ to shine with durood. And number 2, as much sunnah as you can, bring it in your life. Think to yourself, 1 or 2 sunnahs that are not alive in your life, bring it alive now. Build your ta'alluq, build your relationship with the Prophet ﷺ during these times. Right? And tell yourself, Ya Allah, during this time, when people are disrespecting my Prophet, I'm going to elevate him by following his sunnah. And wallahi, whatever these people do, they can never degrade the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ is shining like the full moon. Right? When dogs bark at the full moon, does the light of the moon get extinguished? The moon is still shining there. He's smiling at everyone. Dogs can bark all night long. Nothing will happen to the moon. So, when we're saying that they're disrespecting the Prophet ﷺ, yes, it hurts us, of course, but they can never diminish from the honor of the Prophet ﷺ. And the last thing that I'm going to conclude with is a beautiful statement which Hazrat Maulana Salim Dorat, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, he said something very, very beautiful. And he said, you know what, and during this time, you have people, these khabis people that are there, as non-Muslims, this is what they do, right? As, people who are enemies towards the sacred belief that we have, right? Not saying non-Muslims in the sense that all non-Muslims are bad, but these people, even non-Muslims know that what they're doing is bad. Disrespecting a person's religion, right? If you say something bad about gay people, then what does it become? Homophobic. Go to jail. You say something about someone's gender, you're a sexist. Go to jail. Right? And then you say something about Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam, then suddenly freedom of speech. Suddenly, all of a sudden. But for all the rest of the things, there's no such thing as freedom of speech. So all of this inconsistency is there, but brothers and sisters, they can never take away from the honor of the Prophet ﷺ, so long as we are continuing with this. So what did he say? He said that this is what these people do. They try to disrespect the Prophet ﷺ and cause harm to him because they're enemies of the sacredness which we have for the Prophet ﷺ. But then he said, think about you yourself as a Muslim. Do you cause harm to the Prophet ﷺ yourself by neglecting his sunnah, by neglecting his teachings, by neglecting what he stood for? It's a very, very deep and heavy statement. Yeah, for those people, that's what we expect out of them. That's the type of people that they are. They don't hold sacred things with reverence and honor. We can expect them to behave in this way. But the Shaykh tells us that you yourself as a Muslim, this is not expected of you. It's expected of them that that's how they would behave. But you as a Muslim, are you hurting the Prophet ﷺ in his grave? Or are you making him honored and proud that his ummah is behaving in a certain way and sticking to his teachings? Inshallah, we'll end off with this. May Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala make us amongst those people that will, inshallah, make him proud and do according to his teachings, bring his love alive amongst ourselves and amongst everybody that we know.